Chapter 1, The Day Peace Died. The stars above Earth glittered beyond the transparent dome of Geneva Orbital Station. Thousands of vessels drifted around the station like jewels suspended in darkness, their navigation lights painting thin streaks across the void. Inside the Grand Assembly Hall, representatives from dozens of worlds gathered beneath banners commemorating 50 years of peace. For most of the galaxy, it was a celebration. For Admiral Elias Ward, it felt like a funeral waiting to happen. He stood near the edge of the chamber, dressed in the black uniform of the Strategic Defense Network. Applause echoed as one speaker after another praised the Treaty of Solace. Half a century of cooperation, declared an alien diplomat from the Concordium Council. Half a century without war. The audience responded with enthusiastic applause. Ward remained silent. A woman approached him carrying a glass of sparkling wine. "You're supposed to smile during these things," said President Maria Torres. Ward accepted the glass but didn't drink. "I've attended enough ceremonies to know smiling doesn't change reality." She sighed. "You still don't trust them." "I trust patterns," Ward replied. "And the patterns don't look right." Before Torres could answer, a discreet tone sounded inside Ward's neural implant. "Priority 1. His expression hardened. "Excuse me." He left the hall without another word. Minutes later, he stepped into a secure conference room buried deep within the station. A holographic map of human space floated above the central table. Several intelligence officers were already waiting. Director Nathan Hale spoke first. "We've confirmed the reports." Ward folded his arms. "Show me." Red markers appeared along the frontier. "Fleet movements. Hundreds of them." "Those aren't trade routes," Ward said quietly. "No. Military?" Hale nodded. "We intercepted encrypted communications 3 weeks ago. At first we believed they were routine exercises. They aren't." The hologram zoomed out. More red markers emerged. Supply depots. Fuel reserves. Weapons stockpiles. Every symbol pointed toward one conclusion. Preparation. Ward studied the display for several moments. How many ships? At least 12,000. The room fell silent. Even for the Concordium, that number was impossible to ignore. "When did this start?" Ward asked. 8 months ago. And nobody in the council questioned it. They accepted the official explanation. Ward almost laughed. Official explanations had started wars before. "Anything else?" Hale hesitated. "There's increased activity around their command sectors." That was enough. Ward already knew where this path led. "Prepare emergency channels," he said. "I'll be returning to Luna." The officers exchanged uneasy looks. Nobody asked why. They all knew. Hours later, a military shuttle descended through the gray skies of Luna. Deep beneath the surface, hidden below layers of civilian infrastructure, rested a vault that few people knew existed. The archive. Ward entered alone. Rows of illuminated data pillars stretched into darkness. At the center stood a single recorded message. He activated it. A woman appeared. Former Admiral Catherine Ross. The architect of Protocol Prometheus. The recording was 70 years old. "If you're watching this," Ross began, "the treaty has probably failed." Ward listened carefully. "We accepted peace because humanity needed time to recover. But during negotiations, we discovered clauses designed to limit future ship production, resource extraction, and territorial expansion." Her expression remained calm. "Those restrictions weren't meant to preserve balance. They were meant to weaken us." The message continued. "Refusing the treaty would have triggered immediate war. Accepting it gave us another option. Preparation." The recording ended. Ward stood motionless for several seconds. Every generation since then had carried the burden of that decision. Hope for peace. Preparation for betrayal. Neither excluded the other. Suddenly, alarms erupted across the facility. Sharp. Urgent. Relentless. Ward turned toward the nearest terminal. A communications officer appeared on screen. His face was pale. "Admiral, we've lost contact with the Vega colonies." "What happened?" "Orbital bombardment." The room seemed to shrink. Another alert appeared. Then another. And another. Communications relays destroyed. Shipyards under attack. Defense stations gone dark. The offensive wasn't beginning. It had already begun. "Get me a live feed." The screen changed. A massive Concordium fleet filled the display, emerging from hyperspace above a frontier world. Moments later, energy beams descended toward the surface. The attack was deliberate. Calculated. Planned long before today. A second transmission suddenly interrupted the feed. High Executor Vieron appeared before the entire galaxy. His silver eyes stared directly into the camera. "Citizens of the Concordium," he announced, "evidence has revealed humanity's intention to pursue military domination. To preserve galactic stability, corrective action is now underway." Ward felt no surprise. Only confirmation. The lie had finally arrived. The war humanity feared for 50 years was no longer a possibility. It was reality. Around him, personnel rushed between terminals as emergency protocols activated throughout the solar system. Defense networks came online. Encrypted channels opened. Hidden orders awakened. Ward stepped toward the command console. His voice remained steady. "Authorize Protocol Prometheus." A pause followed. Then the system responded. Authorization accepted. Far beyond known space, ancient commands began transmitting toward destinations that officially did not exist. Ward stared at the stars displayed on the central screen. The treaty had lasted 50 years. The preparation had lasted 50 years too. Chapter 2, The Secret of Prometheus. The first 24 hours of the invasion unfolded exactly as the Concordium had intended. Human colonies along the frontier burned. Trade routes collapsed. Communication networks suffered severe damage. Across the galaxy, news channels replayed images of fleeing civilians and shattered orbital stations. Analysts predicted humanity would be overwhelmed within weeks. High Executor Vieron watched those broadcasts from his command vessel with quiet satisfaction. The opening strike had succeeded. At least, that was what he believed. Far from the battlefield, beneath kilometers of lunar rock, Admiral Elias Ward entered the heart of Protocol Prometheus. The facility was larger than most cities. Hundreds of command stations filled a circular chamber. Holographic displays floated above them, projecting every human-controlled system, every fleet movement, every active engagement. Unlike the chaos outside, the atmosphere here was disciplined. Prepared. Ward approached the central platform. A gray-haired woman turned toward him. Director Lena Mercer. Chief Architect of the Protocol's modern operations. "The first phase is complete," she said. Ward studied the tactical map. Status? 37 hidden facilities have activated. 42 more are coming online. Any compromises? None. For the first time since the attacks began, Ward allowed himself a small nod. The plan was working. Mercer gestured toward the enormous display dominating the chamber. The image changed. A field of asteroids appeared. At first glance, it looked ordinary. Then sections of rock split apart. Massive structures emerged from inside. Shipyards. Dozens of them. Entire manufacturing complexes hidden beneath layers of stone. Ward watched warships glide from concealed docks. Destroyers. Cruisers. Carriers. Vessels the Concordium believed did not exist. Their intelligence services never found them, he asked. Mercer smiled faintly. They were looking for military facilities. And we registered them as mining operations 50 years ago. The display shifted again. Gas giant systems appeared. Within the storms of distant planets, giant platforms emerged from the clouds. Fuel refineries. Construction yards. Supply depots. The scale was staggering. For half a century humanity had quietly built a second industrial network beyond public records. Not because war was certain. Because survival demanded options. Nearby, another officer approached. Commander Ishan Patel. Admiral, reserve mobilization is underway. Ward glanced toward him. How many? 3 million personnel activated so far. Most citizens had never known they were connected to the protocol. Engineers. Pilots. Scientists. Technicians. Each had performed small roles across generations. Individually insignificant. Together, they had created something enormous. Patel lowered his voice. My grandfather helped build one of the first facilities. Ward looked at him. Did he know what it was for? No. A brief smile crossed Patel's face. He thought he was working on deep space resource stations. Ward understood. That was how Prometheus survived. No single person possessed the complete picture. Knowledge was divided. Responsibilities spread across decades. Only a handful knew the full truth. An alarm interrupted the conversation. A new battlefield report appeared. Concordium forces had entered the Epsilon Corridor. One of humanity's critical transport routes. Fleet Commander Reyes appeared on screen. We're taking losses. Ward studied the data. The enemy outnumbered local defenders nearly 4-1. Proceed with Contingency Plan Delta. Reyes grinned. About time. The transmission ended. Several minutes later, the tactical display updated. The Concordium fleet advanced confidently through the corridor. Then dozens of dormant defense satellites activated simultaneously. Missiles erupted from hidden launch chambers buried inside moons and asteroids. The first enemy formation vanished in seconds. Shockwaves illuminated the darkness. A second barrage followed. Then a third. Within minutes, the invasion force was retreating. Cheers erupted throughout the command center. Ward remained focused. One victory changed nothing. The war had only begun. Hours later, intelligence intercepts arrived from Concordium channels. Mercer reviewed them quickly. You'll want to hear this. A recording filled the room. An alien officer spoke urgently. Unexpected resistance encountered. Human defensive capacity exceeds projections. Another voice responded. By how much? A pause. Then the answer. We don't know. Ward exchanged a glance with Mercer. That uncertainty was the first crack. For 50 years the Concordium had studied humanity. They had measured fleets. Counted shipyards. Monitored production. Every calculation relied on one assumption. That they could see everything. They couldn't. Deep inside the command center, another display activated. One that few people had ever witnessed. Thousands of icons appeared across the star map. The room fell silent. Even experienced officers stared in disbelief. The symbols represented fleets. Not active fleets. Hidden fleets. Entire armadas waiting for authorization. Mercer looked toward Ward. The sleepers are ready. The name was fitting. Many of those vessels had remained dormant for decades. Maintained by automated systems. Protected by cloaking fields. Invisible to every foreign sensor network. Patel exhaled slowly. How many ships? Mercer answered. 81,000. The number settled over the room. Humanity's publicly known navy was only a fraction of that strength. Ward gazed at the glowing map. Every marker represented a choice made long ago. Every ship represented years of sacrifice by people who would never know their contribution had mattered. Humanity had accepted peace. Humanity had embraced diplomacy. Humanity had genuinely hoped the treaty would endure. But hope had never replaced caution. A communication request appeared. Priority Alpha. Frontier surveillance. Ward accepted. A young intelligence officer materialized on screen. Her eyes were wide. Admiral, long-range sensors have confirmed movement. From where? She swallowed. Multiple classified coordinates. The tactical map expanded. One by one, enormous formations appeared across the outer reaches of human space. Fleet after fleet. Task force after task force. Silent giants finally leaving their hiding places. Their destinations were already calculated. Every route prepared years in advance. Every response anticipated. The sleeping fleets were moving. Ward looked across the command center. No speeches were necessary. No dramatic declarations. Everyone understood what was happening. For 50 years humanity had appeared vulnerable. For 50 years it had waited. Now the waiting was over. And somewhere beyond the frontier, the Concordium was about to discover the difference between a civilization caught unprepared and a civilization that had spent half a century getting ready. Chapter 3, The Galaxy's Biggest Mistake. 3 days after the invasion began, the Concordium launched its decisive offensive. The target was obvious. Sol. If Earth fell, human resistance would fracture. Every military model produced the same conclusion. Destroy the political center, cripple command infrastructure, and the war would effectively end. High Executor Vieron intended to finish what he had started. His flagship led an armada stretching across millions of kilometers. Thousands of vessels emerged from hyperspace on the edge of the solar system. The operation proceeded exactly according to plan. For 11 minutes. Then reality changed. Deep in the darkness beyond Neptune, empty space rippled. One ship appeared. Then 10. Then hundreds. Within moments, entire formations materialized across the system. The Concordium sensors struggled to process the numbers. New contacts kept appearing. Additional fleets emerged near Saturn. Others arrived from hidden jump corridors beyond the Kuiper Belt. The tactical displays aboard enemy command ships became crowded with warning symbols. Confusion spread rapidly. An alien commander stared at his screen. Where are they coming from? Nobody answered. Because nobody knew. On Luna, Admiral Elias Ward watched the battle unfold from Prometheus Command. Begin Operation Sentinel. Orders flashed through the network. Human fleets accelerated. Thousands of warships moved with remarkable precision, each formation operating independently while remaining connected through quantum communication links. The result looked less like a navy and more like a living organism. The first engagement erupted near Jupiter. Concordium cruisers pushed forward, expecting conventional resistance. Instead, they encountered layered attack groups striking from multiple directions. Missiles crossed the void. Railgun rounds pierced shields. Autonomous drones swarmed vulnerable targets. Within minutes, the lead assault force was shattered. The offensive momentum vanished. Across the battlefield, similar reports poured in. Everywhere the Concordium attacked, hidden defenses and reserve fleets emerged. Their numerical advantage disappeared. Then it reversed. Inside his flagship, Vieron finally received the updated estimate. His intelligence director looked terrified. We have revised the human fleet count. Vierun narrowed his eyes. How many? The answer came quietly. 80,000 warships, possibly more. Silence followed. For decades, Concordium analysts had believed humanity possessed fewer than 10,000 combat vessels. Every projection. Every strategic model. Every invasion plan. Wrong. Vierun clenched his jaw. Find out how. The director hesitated. We're trying. But answers were becoming increasingly difficult to obtain. Human cyber warfare units had already begun penetrating Concordium networks. Several data repositories were compromised. Communications hubs were infiltrated. Encrypted archives started falling into human hands. One discovery immediately drew Ward's attention. A classified file. Created 49 years earlier. The date alone was alarming. Open it, he ordered. The document appeared above the command table. Several senior officers gathered around. As they read, expressions hardened. The file contained minutes from a secret Concordium Council meeting. The Treaty of Solace had never been intended as a permanent agreement. It had been designed to restrict humanity's growth while allowing the Concordium to rebuild from previous wars. One section outlined long-term objectives. Economic containment. Military limitation. Eventual elimination. The final recommendation was chilling. When conditions become favorable, initiate extinction campaign against human-controlled territories. The room fell silent. Mercer spoke first. They planned this from the beginning. Nobody disagreed. Ward continued reviewing the files. Additional records surfaced. Operational drafts. Political memoranda. Strategic forecasts. The evidence painted a clear picture. Most Concordium citizens had no idea. Several member species had never been informed. The conspiracy belonged to a small group of leaders led by Vierun. A war justified through deception. Ward leaned back in his chair. Outside the command center, battles still raged. Yet another decision now stood before him. Reveal the truth. Or keep it classified. Commander Patel broke the silence. People deserve to know. Mercer nodded. So do the member worlds. Ward understood the risks. Public disclosure could destabilize the entire Concordium. It might trigger unrest across hundreds of systems. But hiding the evidence would protect the architects of the war. His choice became simple. Prepare a broadcast. Hours later, every major communication network in known space was interrupted. Civilian channels. Government networks. Commercial systems. The transmission spread everywhere. Humans watched. Aliens watched. Military personnel watched. Then the files appeared. Original documents. Authentic recordings. Undeniable proof. The galaxy learned that the peace treaty had been built upon a lie. Shock followed almost immediately. Public demonstrations erupted on several Concordium worlds. Political leaders demanded explanations. Military officers questioned their orders. Some fleets halted operations altogether. Others withdrew from combat zones. The foundation beneath Vierun's authority began to crack. On his flagship, the High Executor watched the reactions in growing disbelief. "What have they done?" he whispered. No one answered. For the first time since the invasion began, fear entered the room. Not fear of human weapons. Fear of consequences. Meanwhile, reports arrived at Prometheus Command. Concordium formations were retreating. Internal disputes were spreading. Several governments demanded emergency investigations. Ward stood before the main display, observing the changing battlefield. The war was far from over. Powerful enemies still remained. Dangerous battles still awaited. Yet something fundamental had shifted. The struggle was no longer simply about defending Earth. It had become something larger. A fight over truth itself. As messages flooded across the galaxy, exposing secrets hidden for half a century, one fact became impossible to ignore. The Concordium's greatest mistake had not been underestimating humanity's military strength. It had been assuming humanity would keep silent once the truth was uncovered. Chapter 4, The Peace Humanity Chose. The truth spread faster than any fleet. Within 48 hours of Admiral Ward's broadcast, protests erupted across the Concordium. Government buildings filled with angry citizens demanding answers. Military officers questioned orders. Entire planetary administrations denounced High Executor Vieron's actions. The alliance that had appeared unshakable for centuries began breaking apart. And still, Vieron refused to surrender. Intelligence reports placed him at the Concordium capital system, protected by the last loyal elements of his military. He was preparing for one final battle. Inside Prometheus Command, the galaxy map glowed above the central chamber. Ward studied it silently. The Loyalist fleets have concentrated around the capital, Mercer said. Everything they have left is there. Patel folded his arms. They're expecting retaliation. Ward nodded. That's because they're thinking like Vieron. The room fell quiet. Everyone understood what he meant. Humanity possessed the advantage now. The hidden fleets had survived. The Concordium was fractured. Victory was within reach. But how that victory was achieved would define what came next. Ward looked around the room. We end this war today. Hours later, the largest human fleet ever assembled entered hyperspace. Thousands of ships crossed the stars in coordinated waves. Not toward civilian worlds. Not toward population centers. Only toward military targets. The distinction mattered. As the fleet emerged above the Concordium capital, countless vessels filled the darkness. Defense platforms. Battleships. Carrier groups. The remnants of Vieron's power. For a moment, neither side fired. Then a transmission arrived. The High Executor appeared on every command screen. His posture remained proud despite the situation. You could have conquered half the galaxy with what you've hidden. Ward met his gaze. That was never the objective. Vieron's eyes narrowed. You prepared for 50 years. We prepared because we remembered history. You never trusted us. Ward answered immediately. No. We hoped you would prove us wrong. For the first time, Vieron seemed unable to respond. The channel closed. Moments later, the battle began. Energy beams crossed the void. Missiles accelerated toward defensive formations. Human ships advanced with disciplined precision. The engagement lasted 6 hours. Unlike earlier clashes, this one carried a different atmosphere. The Loyalist forces weren't fighting for victory. They were fighting because they had nowhere left to retreat. One by one, defensive lines collapsed. Command stations surrendered. Several fleet commanders switched sides entirely. As the encirclement tightened, Vieron's flagship attempted to break through. It failed. Human interceptors disabled its engines without destroying the vessel. The enormous warship drifted helplessly above the capital world. Minutes later, a boarding team entered the command deck. No resistance remained. The High Executor was taken into custody. Ironically, the formal arrest order came from members of his own government. The war ended shortly afterward. Across the galaxy, weapons fell silent. Relief spread through thousands of systems. Families received messages from loved ones. Trade routes reopened. Emergency aid convoys departed for damaged worlds regardless of species. The rebuilding process began almost immediately. Several weeks later, representatives from hundreds of civilizations gathered on Earth. The meeting took place in Geneva, where the Treaty of Solace had once been celebrated. This time, nobody spoke about perfect peace. They spoke about accountability, transparency, cooperation, lessons learned. Ward sat among the delegates as a new charter was finalized. The agreement abolished the secret authorities that had enabled Vieron's conspiracy. Shared oversight replaced concentrated power. Mutual defense clauses protected every member equally. The signing ceremony concluded beneath a clear evening sky. Afterward, a memorial service honored those lost during the conflict. Humans stood beside aliens. Former enemies stood beside former enemies. The war had left scars on everyone. As the ceremony ended, Ward stepped to the podium. The crowd fell silent. For several seconds, he simply looked across the gathering. Then he spoke. We prepared for betrayal because history taught us caution. The audience listened carefully. We accepted peace because we believed a better future was possible. A gentle breeze moved through the memorial grounds. Ward continued. The difference between survival and destruction was not our fleet size. It was our willingness to learn from the past without becoming prisoners of it. No applause interrupted him. The moment felt too important. We refused to answer deception with vengeance. We refused to answer fear with domination. That choice matters more than any victory. When he stepped away from the podium, the crowd rose to its feet. Not to celebrate a military triumph. To honor a decision. Months later, shipyards across the galaxy worked side by side. Human engineers collaborated with species that had once viewed them as enemies. Cities were rebuilt. Trade flourished. Children grew up hearing stories about the war that nearly destroyed everything. And about the choice that prevented it from happening again. Humanity had prepared for the worst. When the worst arrived, it endured. And when victory finally came, it chose something far harder than revenge. It chose peace. The end.